All right. Well, thank you, Sherelle. I just want to first start off by thanking you for everything you do to put into these events and these symposiums and conferences through the Global Caregivers Network. I know the amount of work and time that you put into it, and it's an honor to be here again this year, and it's even more of an honor to join these incredible speakers that we've had today. And listening to their stories has just been inspirational and really motivating as well. And like I'd said earlier to somebody, often we feel like we're alone and there's no one else out there. And I think it's even more so in the case of being a male caregiver. We're kind of taught to, preserve our emotions, not to show those emotions, and to just kind of push through and often not even ask for help. So, it's really an honor to join these esteemed speakers and guests and be here again this year. So, if you would have asked me years ago what my life would have looked like, I don't think caregiving would have been part of that answer. I was pursuing medical school, I was a newlywed, and I was working at the university, I was working in the hospital. And that all changed one evening when we had received a phone call from a home healthcare nurse that my father needed some help, and the options were he could come stay with us for a couple of weeks or go to rehab for a couple of weeks. It wasn't dementia, it wasn't cancer, it wasn't heart disease. He had sustained a significant fall on his tailbone in the winter here in Michigan, and that bruise developed into an abscess. The abscess ended up bursting, and that, as a result, developed into osteomyelitis, which is infection of the blood and the bones. And so we said, sure. Well, that led to 7 more major surgeries and 24/7 care for almost 3 years in total, but never once encountering all of the different, healthcare disciplines, the surgeons, the rehabs, the social workers, the nurse, the wound care, all of this. No one ever provided us with resources or connected us to resources. And likewise, my father was also a veteran, and he was never provided with any resources, just this specific healthcare need that he was there to see that professional for. And so everybody's staying in their own silos. Nobody knows what the family needs. Nobody knows what the patient needs necessarily outside of the reason for that appointment. So if I'm being even more honest, I don't think I would have pictured myself standing here talking about vulnerability, emotion, and caregiving from a male perspective. Because for a long time, like many men, I was taught something different. Be strong, handle your responsibilities, don't show too much emotion, and figure it out on your own. That's really the script a lot of us are given. But life has a way of rewriting that script. And this is why I say this is an unexpected journey. As I shared, my caregiving journey didn't begin with confidence, it began with responsibility. A loved one, and in my case, my father needed care, and suddenly I was the one stepping in. No training, no roadmap, no real conversations about what it means to be a caregiver, let alone a male caregiver. I just was a son helping my father. And that part matters because while caregiving is universal, the way men experience it is often very different. As men, we often are wired or maybe conditioned to fix things. If something's broken, we repair it. If there's a problem, we solve it. And if there's a challenge, we push through it. But caregiving doesn't often work like that. Sometimes there is no fix. Sometimes there is no solution. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is sit in that moment and simply be present. And for many men, that can feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, even overwhelming for some. I remember those days trying to approach caregiving like a problem to solve, organizing schedules, managing medications, creating structure. And those things do matter and they're important. But what I quickly realized was this: caregiving isn't just about doing always, it's about being patient when those things don't make sense, being calm when emotions run high, being present when words aren't enough. And that shift from doing to being really changed me. As a man, I had learned how to sit with emotions I wasn't used to expressing: frustration, yes; sadness, yes; and fear, and grief, sometimes before anything had fully ended. Because caregiving can come with a kind of quiet, ongoing grief, the kind that doesn't always get acknowledged. And here's really the truth. A lot of men go through this silently. We don't always talk about it. We don't always reach out, and we carry it internally, believing that's what we're supposed to do. But caregiving taught me something else that I didn't expect. Strength isn't just about holding everything in. Strength is knowing when to open up. Strength is asking for help. And strength is allowing yourself to feel and still showing up anyhow. My journey, though, didn't stop at home, it grew. What I experienced as a caregiver, and I want to pause there for a moment on the word caregiver. I never heard the word caregiver that I can think of or that I can really, harken back to during those years. It was my dad needs help. I'm helping my dad. And no one ever said, "Oh, are you a caregiver? Are you a family caregiver?" And I think there is a crux there to the situation that we deal with today and why a lot of us are here advocating and sharing our stories and, our wisdom and our resources that we're all a part of. That's still very similar to the countless families that we encounter with our home care company or with the guests and the people that reach out about all home care matters and wanting to share their stories. The doctor didn't say, "Oh, are you a caregiver for your mom? Are you a caregiver for your wife?" Or whatever the situation may be. They just look at it as the spouse brought the patient in today. They're not going behind the curtain to see what happens when that spouse takes the patient home. And so caregiver needs to be more universally recognized, in my opinion. And so what I experienced as a caregiver began to shape how I saw the world and how I saw other caregivers, especially men who were walking a similar path, but didn't always have that voice. And that's the part of what led me to step into advocacy, to speak, to write, to publish my book, to share, and to connect with others. And not because I had it all figured out, but because I knew how important it was for caregivers, especially male caregivers, to know that they aren't alone on this journey. Because again, let's be honest, male caregivers are often overlooked, sometimes not intentionally, but because of a lot of the things discussed, we're not out there sharing and opening up and making ourselves vulnerable. And sometimes they're overlooked because we're the men, we're the male role model, we're, the provider, we're the support, and it's looked at as a more, feminine role historically. When you think of nurses, let's say, you generally think of a nurse with the nurse's skirt and the hat. Sherelle, you're a nurse, and probably for your nursing school graduation picture, you wore the traditional nurse's hat. My mother was a nurse. I don't know of anybody in her class that was a male nurse, but male nurses are phenomenal. I have several friends who are male nurses. Some of them were Army and military veterans and medics, and, they're serving in local emergency rooms and home health care now. So, male caregivers are often overlooked because we're less likely to be recognized, less likely to be supported emotionally, and sometimes less likely to even recognize ourselves in the role, like myself. But as evident today with the symposium, here we all are. We're showing up, we're doing the work, and that work is powerful. Caregiving asks you to be strong, but not in the way most expect. It asks you to be gentle, to be patient, to be emotionally available. It asks you to really redefine what strength actually looks like. And for me, that strength became quieter. It looked like consistency. It looked like showing up day after day. It looked like doing the hard things even when no one else saw them. There were moments when I absolutely felt overwhelmed. I can recall moments, because I was still at the university, talking to my, group of friends, my circle, and n they would understand, but only so far because they weren't walking that journey. Most of them would be years away from ever having to care for a parent the way I was having to care for mine. So I couldn't have anybody to relate to, and it felt very isolating, very lonely. So it got to the point where they don't wanna hear about last night or the appointment or the surgery or any of these things, and they would be understanding, they'd be sympathetic, but I didn't wanna overwhelm them because of my situation that they couldn't really truly relate to. I didn't wanna be that person that, "Oh, here comes Lance, let's look busy or walk away because we don't wanna hear all about what he's going through with his father again." So there were moments that I felt overwhelmed, moments I questioned myself, moments that I wondered if I was doing enough. And if you're a caregiver or have been a caregiver, especially as a man, you've probably asked yourself that same question. So I want to say this clearly. If you are showing up, if you are trying, if you are giving your time, your energy, and your presence, you're doing enough. Caregiving will change you. It will challenge what you thought strength was and what it looks like. It will push you beyond your comfort zone and maybe even what you think are your limits. And it will ask you to grow in ways that you've never anticipated. But it will also give you something in return. It'll give you perspective, it'll give you purpose, and a deeper understanding of what it really truly means to care for another human being on a level that I consider a privilege to have experienced. And looking back, I realized obviously I didn't choose that journey, but I chose how I responded to it. And that made all the difference. So I like to say to every male caregiver out there, whether you call yourself that or not, we see you. We see the responsibility that you carry. We see the effort that you put in, and we see the strength that it takes to keep going, even when it's hard. I shared with Jason, one of our speakers earlier, that, I felt like we went to church today on a Saturday, and that's great. And, we're strong in our faith. And, I leaned into that very, very hard during these years. I thought I did before, but, until you're really given a circumstance, you don't know what your faith really gets you through. And, I discovered that. And to everyone else that's here watching or listening, support those caregivers in your life, especially the ones who may not ask for it, because those might be the very ones that need it the most. And especially to the ones who are used to handling everything on their own, because caregiving is not meant to be done alone. It's meant to be supported and heard and seen. So this unexpected journey for me wasn't about becoming someone different. It's about discovering really who you truly are. And sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is care. So I invite you. We have wonderful resources at allsauthors.com. There's stories from caregivers across the world, specifically related to dementia. You can visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's over 400 and some different episodes of thought leaders, family caregivers, experts in the fields of long term care, every disease you can think of, family caregivers, spouses, children, parents killing parents caring for children with disabilities, any type of situation that you're facing, there are resources, whether it's on allhomcarematters.com, allsauthors.com, or, visit the internet and look for what speaks to you and what's going to help you through your journey. So again, Sherelle, thank you for this opportunity. To our speakers, thank you for everything that you're doing and for sharing your stories today. I consider myself privileged and honored to be a part of this discussion. And with that, I want to say thank you for your time.